Ki hei mauri ora, e ngā atua, e ngā rangatira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. E ngā tere mate, haere, haere, haere atura. Rātou, kia rātou, tātou, kia tātou. Kei te miha hau, koutou, ko te tangata whenua o te rote uahi nei. I te kaupapa nunui o tēnei rā, tēnā koe, unua tātou. Whakataka te hau ki tūru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kinakina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. I hi ake ana te atakura, i teo, i huka, i hauhu. Tihei mauri ora. Ko waia, ko Brett Ogilvy tōku ingoa, no te arawa me Ngāti Awa ahau. Kei Tonkin ahau e mahi ana. Nō reira e o mā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Good morning everyone, my name is Brett Ogilvy and I serve on the board of directors at Tonkin and also on the executive team where I'm looking after a sustainability strategy across the Tonkin Group. A group of companies with consulting and testing and data acquisition services across Aotearoa, New Zealand and Australia. Welcome everyone. This is our first event as hosts since we joined the Sustainable Business Council a couple of months ago under extreme pressure from Mike Burrell to finally sign up. It might be said that we were a bit slow to the party. We were actually trying to get our house in order before we put ourselves into leadership roles across industry and trying to show other people what to do. With that in mind, I want to acknowledge SPC and the partners here today, Te Whatu Health New Zealand and Southern Cross Healthcare for their support and their contribution to this event. And we've got an awesome panel who I'll be handing over to in a minute. I just wanted to say, because I've got one of these things in my hand, and which I don't know how to work. Oh, here we go. Today's actually, this week's a big event for Tonkin & Taylor. So we're about 1,400 people across Australia and New Zealand, offices throughout both countries. This building here, so just welcoming you to our whare, is part of our sustainability journey, and I'll be talking about our sustainability report in a minute. In the lockdowns back in 2020, our lease in our old office in Newmarket came to an end, and we had to make a decision about where we were going to be next, whether we were going to stay there or move somewhere else. We chose this opportunity came up. NZI had realised that a lot of NZI who owned the building or built the building for themselves realised that a lot of the roles that they have could be done by people working remotely or working from home. So they decided to downsize their office space right there and then. So we took on half of the lease of half of the building. Environmentally, it's a Sustainable Business Council Green Star 5 building. Our fit out, we took the opportunity to push it to next level. So this was the first office fit out that got the 6 Green Star rating from Sustainable Business Council. So that's something we're pretty proud of. And if you get a moment or look us up, come and get a tour of what goes on upstairs, and we'll be very, very proud to show you. Now that's part of our sustainability journey, just in terms of literally getting our whare in order. This week we have released our 2024 sustainability report. Link there via the QR code. Today is the first time that anyone has spoken about it to people outside of Tonkin & Taylor, so very proud to mention that and invite you to take a look. Inside you'll see a bit of our story about our journey, both around and our sustainability strategy, which, as I say, starts with getting our house in order. Some stuff in there around that we're particularly proud of in terms of what we're doing with our workforce, around gender pay equity gap and how we're doing with that, diversity and inclusion, our carbon journey, our decision to be net carbon zero for our operations back in 2020, which we continue to be, and just some examples of what we do in terms of our own operations. Having done that, we see the opportunity through our people, our expertise, to help the outside world, help our clients, help the communities that they work in to also be sustainable, and I guess that's a big theme around what we'll be talking about today. Just a bit of housekeeping. In the case of emergency, you can either go out the way you came, or if someone has managed to light a fire just outside that door, you can go out either of these and just follow the people round to the right or round to the left There are security arrangements on the doors, but they will come off as soon as there's an emergency, so there's all sorts of ways out. Wharepaku are also around, go out that door, around to the right and right again, over there, through that wall there actually. And I just wanted to note that there's filming going on, so Matt and the crew are filming there. The intention of the video footage is that people who are not with us today and who were oversubscribed were very keen to hear what goes on and to share, so that's what that will be used for. Final thing, now it comes to me to introduce, well, firstly I'll introduce, in fact lastly, I will introduce Jay Prangle, who is our facilitator for today, and she will introduce our panel, who look like that. So Jay believes in doing good in the world, putting her people skills to good use to affect change. Before joining Sustainable Business Council, she spent 10 years working in the UK in a variety of program management and communication roles across the commercial and community sectors. At SBC, she supports businesses to embed sustainability at both the governance and operational level, championing them to do the right thing by people and planet. So over to you, Jay.
Thanks, Brett. Everyone hear me okay? Fantastic. I was just having a chat with the lovely Eden, where are you, Eden, from Auckland Council, and we were reflecting on the fact it's really nice to be in an event that focuses on such a cross-cutting theme, because health and well-being and climate change, of course, touches every aspect of our lives as individuals, but also as businesses. And I go to a lot of beautiful breakfast events, although I'm not a morning person, so that is one of the challenges of my role. And a lot of them are quite sector specific, so freight decarbonisation or embodied emissions, all of which are really important parts of decarbonisation. But I think climate change, health and well-being is just a topic that is meaningful to us all, and hopefully today we get to understand a little bit more about why it is so meaningful to you as individuals and your business as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce someone who lives and breathes this stuff, which is Victoria Blake, and it tells me here that she has over 15 years of experience in sustainability. I'm surprised it's only 15, Victoria, in conservation, and she spent the last 5 years focusing on sustainability and resilience in the public health sector. And you currently hold the role of Principal Advisor of Climate Risk and Adaptation for Te Whatu Order Health New Zealand. I'm going to pass over to you, Victoria, to talk a little bit about the why are we here, and why is climate change and health so important to all of us. Thanks, Victoria.
Kia ora tātou, aere mai ahau i le tongi i te mātou o Māui, o roko mai wahine, tau tama, kei tau moana ahau i mo ana, ko Victoria Blake toko mua. I don't quite know how to take the comment of it's only 15 years. I mean,
But so wise.
Because I'm so wise, right? Okay, but yes, well, I'll take that. So yeah, nice, well done. So it is a genuine privilege to be here today and to talk about something that is really, really close to my heart. For those of you that know me, I've been talking about climate change and health since I entered the health sector 5 years ago. Climate risk is something that is really, really concerning to me, and how we manage that in the healthcare sector and how we ensure resilience is something that is very important, not just to me, but to all of us. I'm going to tell you stuff you already know, but we just sort of scene setting a little bit here. Ka ora te tai ao, ka ora te tangata. There is so much research that shows that the health of the environment impacts on health and well-being, and that's not just human health and well-being, that's health and well-being of all creatures, or flora and fauna. So we really do acknowledge this, and just a shout out to AIA and your 5590 plus report, which really which really highlights that, as well as the environment as being one of those key factors there, and that is one of the framings that we're actually using with Te Whatu Order, which is great for us in our work to be levering off. I'm not going to go on about these things that I know you already know, but I'm going to share some slides because I think they are quite impactful. This is one here that just sort of identifies some of the physical health issues that are raised by climate change. So we know that there are issues with sea level rise, we know that there's issues with water quality, we know that there's issues with food quality, rising temperatures, etc., etc. I mean, I could talk to this slide alone for an hour. But highlighted in here is vector and waterborne diseases. What does access to food, what impact does that have on our health and well-being? Not to mention the physical health ailments that are caused by rising temperatures, and there's actually quite a lot happening in Asia, around temperatures that are rising and multiple deaths. And this isn't just about death. right? It's not. It's not just about injury either from physical risks. And we can see here in this wonderful report that my colleagues in Whatu, Canterbury have put together around the climate change, risks of climate change in health. Is the fact that, you know, in risk language it's direct and indirect, but actually if we look at the cascading impacts and we realise that all of this is connected, and it has a genuine impact on our health and well-being. And I think, you know, one of the framings we can do is be a little bit selfish, and we're quite good at that in society today, of being the what about me. You know, so why not take that what about me lens? What about if I get really unwell? What about if this is actually making me sick and impacting on my quality of life and the quality of life of my children? You know, let's be selfish. We're really good at it, so let's use that selfishness for good and start using it to help us with our decision making. I get a little passionate, so I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop there. But I think that's probably framed the kōrero quite well for today.
Lovely illustration of the why. At Countdown/Woolworths. Is anyone else struggling with a rebrand? Is it just like a come full circle, bring back 3 guys? Before joining Arvida as the Head of Sustainability and Compliance, and you're involved in the technical working group, is that fantastic? That's great. So Arvida's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the technical aspects of the scenarios. Over to you.
Jane, thanks very much. I actually married into the surname, so I can't take credit for that one.
Are you going to talk about this?
Sorry, I'm going to talk a little bit about scenarios which we're launching. It was an awesome project. It was a collaboration across many different entities. It was, I'm going to say, there was some challenges. You know, it was a little bit like herding cats sometimes, but it was a really awesome experience and a really great example of what the health sector can do when we work together and we take the time to consider some of these bigger questions. The scenarios, we focused on 3 scenarios, and we did that because there is some legislation out there that we were trying to meet the requirements for. Many of the entities that are involved in the project are required to report against the mandatory disclosure, so it was in accordance with that. But the thing that was sort of slightly different is we didn't just focus on businesses and the impact on business. We really focused on the broader healthcare sector and the impacts on health and wellbeing. So there was a different lens to some of the other sector scenarios that are out there. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all the participants. There are quite a few people here that were involved in the project. It took a long time. There were many workshops, and it was challenging. So I really want to say thank you to all the people who were involved in helping us to develop these scenarios. So this slide sort of just speaks to the fact that we looked at many different factors, including those healthcare ones.
Thanks, Arvine. That's great. I like the term ambitious and orderly. Is it? Ambitious? Yeah, cool. I'm putting that on my LinkedIn profile as a description of myself. My next panelist almost needs no introduction because he's a bit of a sustainability rock star in my eyes. There's like 5 people that I really, over the course of my career, got excited about meeting, and James is one of them. And I told him this morning, and he nearly died of embarrassment, so I thought I'd say it on the public stage as well. James has a only 20-year career in the environment sector. There we go, now even. And leads Tonkin Taylor's climate change and resilience practice. He's been involved in a number of projects over recent years, including the National Climate Change Risk Assessment, the Deep South Challenge, and a range of scenario planning and climate risk studies. And whenever I hear people talk about scenario planning, I hear James's name associated with it. So James is going to give us a little bit of a flavour of some of the scenarios by sharing some of the case studies, I suppose you could call them, that came out of the analysis.
Yeah, we might, kia ora tātou. Thanks everyone for coming today, and this is pretty exciting that we're launching the health sector scenarios. And just by way of, I guess, overview, what are scenarios? So these are stories of the future, and plausible but challenging stories about how not only climate might change and associated societal changes that might follow that, but also how they could impact on the health sector. They are not predictions. They are really challenging and pretty scary, some of them as well. And I think there's a bit of, I suppose, and I think there will continue to be some misunderstanding about scenario planning and how to use scenarios. And I think we're all on that journey. A lot of effort's going into building these stories. And those in the room who do this work, I know there are a range of them, you'll be nodding. A lot of effort going into creating these storylines, but now we've got to ask ourselves, how do we use them? And how do we make best use of these to challenge our strategies, challenge our organisations and change what we do? So with that in mind, yeah, well, there are 3 scenarios that were built. There was an orderly and ambitious one, there was a disorderly scenario, and then there was a hothouse, and those 3 titles, if you like, are pretty common. You'll see if you have followed other scenarios in other sectors, there's a pretty common way to structure them. That isn't also necessarily a requirement. If you're doing scenario planning, you can create scenarios in any way you like. So what I thought I might do, anyway, with that in mind, so I'm just going to read out a couple of paragraphs from the hothouse one, and that might help set the scene for the discussion. Let's see how we go. So this, if you do end up looking at them, they are quite long, and I'll credit my colleague Ben Sims. I'd just like to acknowledge Ben for all the hard work that he did. He's sitting at the back there. They are quite long and detailed, so you hopefully, if you're in various parts of the health sector, you'll go to the section that most reflects where you sit and what is of interest. I'm just going to read out the global context for the hothouse world. Here we go. The world moves into an era defined by extreme nationalism and geopolitical tension. Domestic issues are prioritised over regional and global concerns, with efforts to address greenhouse gas emissions being supplanted by a focus on economic growth. In November 2024, the newly elected administration in the US announces their withdrawal from the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC, which is the Climate Convention. As a result, throughout the 2020s, there was increased instability and distrust in the global climate negotiations, and additional countries began to withdraw from the UNFCCC. The international climate framework holds on by a thread for a decade, but officially collapses in 2036. This triggers a dramatic decline in the price of European emissions credits and the global collapse of emissions markets. As there is minimal action to reduce emissions, global average temperatures surpass 2 degrees by 2050 and increase to 3.6 degrees above pre-industrial levels by 2100. Severe, frequent, and in some cases irreversible physical impacts result, which cause widespread loss and damage. Economic development is severely hindered and poverty increases in climate vulnerable countries across the century. This heightens international health security concerns, particularly from infectious diseases and food insecurity. Government institutions at all levels are challenged due to the multiple and cascading implications from climate risks and poor economic performance. The level of public investment in health and education declines globally. Health impacts are widespread and increase in severity across all aspects of society, with large health inequities both within and between countries. So that's pretty scary, and that's the global context. And then it goes into the national side. That's pretty heavy stuff, but that's where we landed with the hothouse world. And if you were reading that as an organisation, you go, shit, what do I do? How would you respond? So I'll apologise for that kind of intro, but it does set the scene a little bit.
Thanks, James. Super uplifting. So we're now going to pass to Greg.
I should have asked before I read that out.
That's okay. It's good to be grounded in the reality of what we're facing if we don't continue to take action and build momentum in whatever sector you're working in. So Kapai for outlining that for us. Greg, though, it is your challenge to cheer us up a little bit. Talk about what you're doing in Southern Cross. That's no specialty. Okay, cool. We might step you on the channel then. Greg is the head, like me, head of ASG. Fun. We should start a group together at Southern Cross Healthcare, and has over a decade of experience working in sustainability, including in retail, transport, technology, health, not-for-profit, and public sectors. Whew. Prior to working in sustainability, Greg spent several years in Asia, presumably backpacking, Australia and New Zealand as a consultant, in data analytics and market research. I'm quite interested to know, Greg, because I think there can be a lot of focus on risk and compliance and the challenges that we face as society within climate change. I'm interested to know, how are you responding to that in Southern Cross, and what sort of innovations or opportunities are you looking at in Southern Cross to be able to adapt and mitigate to some of these scenarios? Give us a little bit of positive innovation flair. Here you go.
Please.
For those who know me, the idea of me doing an uplifting talk is a bit of a challenge. Yeah, a few heads nodding there. Before I answer that question, first, I wasn't involved in scenario work. I started only just recently at Southern Cross Healthcare, so awesome work by the guys. What I love about the scenarios is they're great for education. They're great for, when I take the executive through it in a few weeks, helping them understand these are the different versions. And one of the stories that wasn't shared is the really cool stories about effectively taking different people and their personas and how they're surviving in the different scenarios as well. That's a really, really cool tool. So the uplifting bit. So healthcare, we use a lot of energy. We use a lot of devices. We do a lot of stuff that's good for people, not necessarily good for the planet. What I've found in this industry, though, compared to others, is our suppliers are helping us out a whole lot in innovating. And when we look, I think it's UK-based research, which says of all the healthcare emissions, about 2/3 comes from supply chain. So our suppliers being involved is really, really important. So late last year, Johnson & Johnson, a rather large medical devices company, they worked with us to develop a recycling scheme for some of the devices that are used in eye surgery. And it was world first. Okay, great thing about working with large companies in a small market, so it doesn't work out, no one knows. So there is that appetite for a bit more innovation. Probably the biggest area where I wouldn't call it innovation for us, but at least thinking laterally is about our energy use. So at Southern Cross Healthcare, 10 hospitals that we own and run ourselves, we chew through almost 30 gigawatt hours of energy a year, of which 3/5 comes from fossil fuels, mainly natural gas. Everyone goes, well, why don't you electrify? That's the easy story. And sorry, trying to say uplifting here. There's just too much. There's too much we use of natural gas to switch over to electricity. We're in residential areas. Normally, the grid doesn't have capacity. So what's making us think differently is, okay, well, how can we change our mix? How can we go and during peak times, we keep the natural gas going. We're also looking at biofuel as well. And then off-peak times, we move to electricity. So it's how can we mix those things up? Because another thing in healthcare, we always need redundancy. One thing fails, we need the other working. And that plays really, really well for us, changing that mix of fuels. Not hugely innovative in the grand scheme of things. High temperature heat pumps aren't new. But for us as an organisation, it's innovative from thinking before, let's just take natural gas and take electricity. So it's making progress. Thank you.
I think you did fit the brief there, so thank you. We are going to open up to questions from the floor now. We have a mic at the front, so not in the audience, so possibly if you could just project when you want to ask your question so other people can hear you, that would be fantastic. And if you could introduce yourself, just say who you are and where you work, that would be excellent too. While you have a ponder, we had a pre-registered question, presumably from Dave Watson from Auckland Council, or Eden, one of the council representatives, I'm joking, about what role can Auckland Council play in navigating and responding to these scenarios. Are you happy to answer that one, Victoria, as a government representative today? I don't know why I'm doing this for government, but cool.
It's all body for government. Look, I think all organisations can be really aware of the health and wellbeing impacts and what that might mean for them. And I think that is a really important thing that's been highlighted through recent conversations is that the fact that health and wellbeing impacts on all of us and therefore all of our organisations. How can we get involved? I think the thing to consider is that this isn't just about emergency response, but it is about that. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, it's quite layered, and it's also about public health improvement. It's also about climate action, which enables public health improvement. It's also about urban environments. It's also about active transport. Looking at my friend and colleague Nick von Brandau over there, he's like, what else should I say? Because he's got a long list of the things that are really important. And actually, local government and the responsibilities that local government have are really important for population health improvement, and climate action will enable that. So, you know, we have the National Public Health Service, and they do work with councils. We also have our emergency management teams within Te Whatu that work with local government around emergency response. I think the thing to really remember, and I have whānau from Hawke's Bay, and apologies to anyone from Auckland that this may be upsetting for all thing about to say, because I know that many of us were impacted last year by some of the weather events. But my aunt's brother was almost washed away in rising floodwaters. I drove through East Dale in December last year and took some photos of East Dale a year later. You can literally, I don't know if any of you have done the road, but as you come over the hill and you come down, it feels, you actually feel it. You can feel it as you drive through that place. And I think the thing that we kind of tend to forget is it's not over. Just because we've had an event, it isn't over. I'm also telling cheery stories today. But, you know, it isn't over, and, you know, it really feels as though there has been, you know, it feels like a war zone. It looks like a war zone. And I think that's something that we have to remember, is that this isn't about an event. You know, this is about, we do response really well, but it's about the tail, and how do we actually manage this? And how do we make sure that the health risks that are raised by events like this don't continue? You know, we all know that mental health is a significant issue here. I wasn't even in the Hawke's Bay, and I was personally affected by this one event. So, you know, that was really cheery.
Thanks, guys, stuck around. Thank you. Go, Victoria. It's useful to be grounded in the reality of what these events are like for the people living in those areas and those impacted by them, and the fact that it is not one event and a one-off, it is a cascade and it is continuous. So, on that cheerful note, other questions, please? Mark.
Thank you for all your lovely intros, and I totally agree with you, Victoria. No one down there went down there on July, and being down a month ago is horrible, and we're still suffering. So, my wife's a psychiatrist, and she deals with you know, mental issues, and the younger generation are really suffering now in that they see this horrendous set of events coming. And the question, I guess, is how do we as a group, because we're all older here, how do we embrace the younger generation who are looking for hope? How do we get them involved in helping the decision makers actually make the right decisions?
Great question, Mark, from Ecotricity. Thank you. I'm actually going to pass this to Greg. I know you're only 6 months into your health journey, but I'd be quite interested to know what Southern Cross, how that turns out for you. And I'm just presumably you've got family, whether they are fur babies or skin babies is the other. I know, right? I'm so glad I said it out loud on the microphone. That's the other term used. Or elderly, whoever in your circle you feel fits the brief that I was speaking to. I'd like to know how you respond to that person again.
And stay happy. That other one as well. I think, so of our hospitals, whenever I go to our hospitals, there is no shortage of interest, desire, willingness to do more, particularly around the area of waste. So what's really positive, people that, is helping the people in the hospitals know what they can do. Which often is stuff around waste, which doesn't sound that significant, but it all helps, and it helps bring also more positive stories, which then they share, which I know many of them they share at home, and also with others in the community. So our private hospitals, they talk a lot to the public sector and to others in healthcare. So just those stories just helps people feel like they're doing something. To the more professionally trained in the area. Waste, you may say, isn't really that big, but it's really about the engagement, and it helps people share their information. That's kind of it, really. So I don't have fur babies. I have lots of plants and trees, which I talk to a lot, and a few of them did slip down the bank last year in the bad weather, but that's luckily all that we got. But I think it is just keeping those stories going, and sometimes they might feel quite unimportant, but they make a difference. Yeah, that's it. Just making sure those stories are out there. You can read Jonathan Burrow's new book. His whole push now is about civil unrest, effectively. It's another way to do it. Hasn't worked effectively for the last 40 years. Might be working a bit more now. But it's his positive stories, and they just help build momentum. Never quickly enough, in my opinion, but it's what's necessary. Just those continual stories, and they start to affect people in a good way.
Thank you, Greg. I think what you say about connecting it to giving people a feeling as though that their contribution matters and that they can take action is another key thing from what you said as well, and making sure that we are telling stories of the positive changes that's happening is really key. Vanessa.
For all of you that are here in 4 different areas, I guess, of work that you're in, with the scenarios that have now been developed, what's next? Will this help pave your pathway, or will it take down barriers? So how is this going to, what next for you guys in your individual organizations? What does that look like for you?
Nice, thanks Vanessa from WSP. I'm going to hand to our insurer friend here because I'm quite interested to see how it turns out in your sector.
Aged care. Aged care. Great question, Vanessa. So we've already started to use them, and Arvida was a leader in wanting healthcare sector scenarios because we have quite a split business model. So we have a sort of property business, and we also have a aged care retirement business that we look after old people and we house them. So because of that, we have the property and construction sector scenarios, but we needed something to sort of help us determine what might be in store for us from a healthcare perspective. So that's why we were quite instrumental in wanting these scenarios. And what we've done is we've sort of stitched those 2 sector scenarios together to create something for us that's sort of relevant to our business. And then we've done a series of workshops with the executive to really get them to engage with what could happen in the future and to get their opinions. Now, it was interesting, the sort of findings. They, unlike what sort of Victoria suggested, they were actually not that keen to catastrophize and think about the risks, because there's quite a lot of them already in the sector scenarios. They were actually quite keen to talk about the opportunities and what it meant for us. So, what could Arvida do if we find ourselves in a hothouse world? What are the opportunities for Arvida to be able to maintain our business and to continue to grow? So I think that's certainly what we've been doing, looking at the risks, but also thinking about the opportunities for us.
Thanks, Arvina. One of those key opportunities is apparently diversifying into the insurance sector. So that's why I think that was
I'm Nick Morrison from Go Consulting. In a previous life, I was a fitness trainer. Spent 10 or so years in that world, and so I'm just really interested in that point that someone made, so I want to hear at the start about the impacts on individual health, because I spent 10 or so years training people to change their habits for their own health and well-being, and that was bloody hard as it was. So then trying to get people to change for this big, global issue that they can't really connect with. How do you see kind of the working these scenarios playing into that in terms of the individual impacts and trying to get people to understand the health impacts of a changing climate, changing world? Any thoughts?
I thought you were just going to stop at I used to be a personal trainer and there wasn't even going to be a question. You were just like, throwing it out there, guys. Victoria, you've done some direct engagement with community prior to your role. Do you want to touch on that, or is there someone else that has a strong view on how you support individual action? Have you seen it turn up in the different scenarios you've done, Jade, and the organisations you've put that into practice?
I think, I guess just starting almost being finished off around the use of the scenarios and I've got an example of a colleague who was working, I think, for a bank, and they had these scenarios developed. They locked the executive in a room for a day and said, you need to read all of these. And the chief executive stood up and said, at the intro, and really owned it and said, I want everyone in this room to, by the end of this session, to tell me what they would do when these things play out, and we want to document this. And at the end, this is third hand, they actually changed some of their strategy as a result of reading through some of those things. So that's at the corporate level. I think at the individual level, you know, some of the changes we need to make, and it goes back to the points around hope and as well, I think we're seeing a lot of the action I see personally that is making a difference is actually the community. And so when we see activities in the local community where individuals or community groups are out there trying to change the way people commute or changing the way we build our urban form. And I think urban form and transport for me is such an important lever, and we don't get that right in New Zealand for a whole range of reasons. But if we can change the way we build cities and make them more livable, more vibrant, and allow people to have more engaging and low carbon lifestyles, that's kind of where we need to head. But how do you do that is such a challenge, because we're kind of relying on, in my opinion, regulatory change that enables that to happen, but doesn't necessarily bring the market in to build that. So I think there's a little gap there that goes, where do you invest the government and public sector with the private sector invest in trying to actually build the changes that we want to see to enable people to live better lives. And I think that's what we've got to do. At the moment we're kind of going, yes, we need to do this, here's some regulatory change, but that's kind of where it stops. So the market continues, rather than Tauranga, building 20,000 homes at the end of Papamoa, and because that's where the cheap land is, rather than in the city where there's 200 empty shops and it's ripe for redevelopment. But, you know, anyways, I don't know if I answered your question.
It's a good idea.
I might just add something to that actually too, is that you're quite right, we don't do things for ourselves, we're really bad at getting healthy for ourselves. But there is a lot of evidence to show that doing this for our children works, right? And a lot of the health comms actually you'll see do it for your whānau. And actually if we think about the image from the IPCC report, even in a best case scenario, if we're all following the rules and hitting the targets, we're going to see temperature increases over the next, I really am cheery, eh? I bring all the fun chats. But if we start to think about our children and our mokopuna or our descendants, our children's children and their children, we start to think about being often referred to as a good ancestor too, then we are more driven by change if we're doing it for people that care about them, if we're doing it for ourselves. So, we can potentially lever off that as well. And I'm sure you've tried that with your PT, so.
Colleague in the blue blazer.
Ko Saskia Bryce, thank you so much for amazing conversation. I'm just really impressed with the collaboration that has happened to create these scenarios, and I was wondering if and how we can learn from that, because I see that beautiful first words under the Tonkin and Taylor thing saying together, and I am a very big believer that the collective action, the collective wisdom is going to help us drive to where we need to be and not end up in the hothouse world. So what can we learn from your collaborative efforts? And how do we do this going forward towards action and not just scenario telling?
Ben, you spoke a little bit about the collaboration, so I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, so I think you just have to find some really tenacious people who don't let things go, and then get them to lead. I was sort of lucky. I sort of started the journey and was sort of really keen to find some people, and luckily I found Victoria, and then started just building from there. And it was just conversations with people. I just kept trying to talk to people and say, hey, I think this is a really good idea. I think we should do this for the healthcare sector. Look what other sectors have done. We can do a better job. And so, yeah, it was hard, don't get me wrong, but it, talked already about passionate people, and I think it's finding those passionate people and then tapping into them, and yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. From my perspective, I think there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of goodwill, and a lot of learning as well by everyone. And we had really strong expertise on the technical working group from, to give you an example, from public health experts, climate specialists. We had people from the different sort of representatives on the subsectors, the aged care sector, the primary tissue care. And we separately formed a Te Ao Māori Draw Group, which was really, really valuable. Anthony's here who led that on that side, and that I think added a lot of interest and value and kind of richness to the scenarios as well. So I encourage you to have a look at those parts.
I wasn't involved, so I'm going to make a general statement. Really what I found with collaboration with our suppliers or elsewhere, it comes down to openness. Some suppliers just don't want to borrow it, where others do. And sometimes when they're not open to collaborating, don't waste your time. Really. So what's clearly happened with this group here, which is awesome, is they've all had openness and willing to collaborate. And sometimes it's not going to work. We want the next one. My biggest learning.
Morning everyone, my name is Annie Scott from Oricon. I just have a question. We talk a lot about acute risks versus chronic risks, and sustainability and climate change being a chronic risk in the sense of most of us don't actually perceive that we can actually die from climate change at the moment. We're like, oh, that's not a me problem right now. And obviously you talked about bringing whānau and mokopuna into it. But I still think, even I went to a school recently, and even the school kids didn't seem to care about separating their rubbish and climate change, because again it's just that feeling of it's not going to affect me anytime soon. And so from I guess a health perspective, how do you see that we can change that thinking? I think probably all of us in the room feel like the world's on fire and why does everyone else not care, but it's the bigger masses of needing to push.
Thank you. How do we make climate change a me problem? Great framing. Greg, given you've worked across so many different sectors, I might start with you because that will be a common challenge across all sectors, including health. Any reflections?
And stay positive. If I think of most recently, I'd say now compared to 10, 15 years ago, there's greater receptivity to taking action. Then there's always a challenge of people going from that step to actually behaviour change. The actual behaviour change piece hasn't moved as much as any of us would have liked. When I look at what I've done in my career, it's been it's literally engaging person by person or site by site, whether it be when I was in retail in a store or whether it's now in a hospital, helping them understand what the impact is. Most people don't know, and they won't immediately change, but once they realise that, for example, medical waste doesn't just go in landfill, it goes through a whole big process where it gets sterilised and lots of extra energy gets used, and then it goes into landfill. Once people start to realise these things, which is stuff you don't want to know about healthcare, trust me, once they actually start to realise this, you can see them go, oh, that's what I found the most effective way. It is not scalable, is the problem. I used to work at the warehouse back in the day before eco goods were really kind of a thing. I'd say now some of that stuff has now become kind of, in certain categories, common across the entire market. So people, for certain products, would not buy a non-eco product. So I think it's changing. Part of that is, in the case of the warehouse, is you've got certain categories where the whole thing just shifts. So people don't really have a choice. But when people do get the choice, like what you're talking about, it's making them understand, engaging with them, and being patient. Because it takes an awfully long time. Anyone else?
Education is a huge part too. I'm lucky enough to have worked in tertiary education before my venture into health, and it's really one of the most amazing things I've ever done, and I do hope to go back to education at some point. I just want one of those places, you know. But you know, it really is education, and there are a lot of educators both in primary, secondary and in tertiary that are really trying to create education programs to start to build this. And there are a lot of schools that are doing like a lot of eco schools and a lot of green programs that are happening, particularly in primary schools, that are creating this education. So I'm sorry you've come across one that isn't, because it is actually pretty common, and that's also where a lot of the behaviour change is coming from, is actually from children and families that are like, you're doing that wrong. That, you know, there's a bit of family guilt, it's like, okay, I better recycle because my 8-year-old won't love me anymore if I don't put that in the right bin. So yeah, so education is critical, and it is within organisations, you know, like a huge part of, speaking to the converted, but we all know that constant engagement is a significant factor in any of our sustainability programs, and we can't get people to change if they don't know why. So, you know, it has to be about me or about my family so that I will change, but I have to actually know what I'm doing, and that's sort of what Greg was talking about, you know, until you understand what's happening. But the other part of it too is many of you will know behaviour change, it also has to be easy. That has to be just as easy as it would be to not do that thing. So, yeah, those are some of our challenges.
Great tips there, Victoria. We've got time for a couple more questions. If anyone's had their hands up for a really long time and I haven't seen you, can you wave? I'm thinking Sophie. Yes, great hair today, Sophie. Over to you.
Did you say great hair? Love you back. I'm Sophie Hayway from MEP. Just going back to the scenarios, I'm interested to revisit the document, but at MEP obviously we recommend that people use an 8.5 scenario in their planning, not because it's plausible or likely, but because it's good for some stress testing scenarios. Is there, maybe this is you, James, as a free consultant. What was the consideration of 8.5? Did you consider using that? If not, why not?
Could you also explain what 8.5 is? Because I'm conscious not everyone will live and breathe it. Yeah, not.
There we go. I just described it.
Okay, I'll have a crack at that. So, yeah, when you're thinking about climate change and you're thinking about the plausible futures in terms of warming, there are, in the new climate IPCC report, there are 5 scenarios that the IPCC created. The high-end one, the most extreme, is called RCP 8.5, which leads to a world where we're in the order of 4 degrees warmer by end of century. The next one under that is a new one, it's called SSP 3-7. Now, the latest IPCC report has said that it is unlikely that the world can burn enough carbon to reach that high-end scenario. The next one under that is pretty bad as well, so we're kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but a lot of, so the question though, coming back to the high end, the flashing red line that goes up into the sky for the RCP 8.5, is that that level of warming could still occur, or the level of impact could still occur through other means, and that's probably the caveat to that. So we might not be able to burn enough carbon, but we could have tipping points, the models might be wrong, there's a whole bunch of new debates occurring, well it's not new debates, but there are debates around the sensitivity of the climate models that are out there, so every day there's a new report that comes in. So in terms of when you're thinking about risk, if you want to use RCP 8.5 or SSP 8.5, you can do that. There's no reason not to. It's just bearing in mind the caveats behind it, what that scenario means, and I guess the use cases for it. The other point is that NIWA, who do the downscale projections for New Zealand, they've chosen not to downscale the 8.5. They're just doing the next one under that, which is the slightly less. How small is that, or how big should we design our pipe and our drainage systems, and what climate scenario should we use when we think about the rainfall intensities? We actually need to pick a number, and there's a difference in those, and that's where, for those of you following the media, that's hit the media lately around Are we being too conservative? Are we not? What should we use? What is the most appropriate scenario to use? So while it seems kind of academic, it actually does become quite pointed when you get to some of those questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right, and
yeah.
They do 8.5, but it's a different modelling, it's too much detail. But yeah, it's interesting if you're building a thing that has to last for a certain amount of time. I'm just really interested in the health sector, how using that 8.5 scenario to stress test the health, the health effects we've all talked about here, or is it already bad enough that you've got to a point where there's like that's just going to be bad? It doesn't matter if we do 8.5 or not. Is that sort of the reason not to use it?
Yeah, I mean, we ended up using 3.7 in our high extreme one, which was a discussion around the climate experts on the group, but still that was an extreme level of warming. We got to, for example, 35-degree days with high humidity. I was reading yesterday, that's something, the global cost of that had been estimated in terms of morbidity is something like $500 billion annually of additional morbidity in the global south caused by the global north who are making all the emissions. So that, you can put numbers to some of this. But yet, that scenario of 3.7, our scenarios had those high and extreme temperatures and the various impacts. So I think in practice the narratives don't really distinguish between the 8.5 or the 3.7. It's kind of, it gets really hot, what could plausibly occur given the uncertainties and
One last question from here.
Kia ora, I'm Di, I work in the sustainability team. I wanted to build on Mark's earlier question around wellbeing and being reasonably young in the industry. I wanted to ask all of you, what do you do for your own mental wellbeing working in this space? Because it's not easy, it is very challenging. Often when I'm talking to my friends, it's kind of like a panic kind of situation. How can we expect the younger generations to want to be doing this sort of work when a lot of the time it's incredibly challenging? So what do you do, both in the house space and mental wellbeing space, to look after yourselves and those around you?
It's a lovely question to end on, and I might answer it too if I can take the initiative as the facilitator. I do two things. I surround myself with a strong community that supports me, so that's my family and my friends and the people that also work on sustainability who get it. And we support one another, and we have space to unpack when things are challenging or when stuff turns up at work that we just don't feel like we're making enough impact on, so that is really useful to me. And the other thing I do is I ground myself in the present moment by spending time in nature and by connecting with the things that are the places we're trying to have the positive impact. So going into my local bush, spending time on the beach, because that reminds me when you're working in the esoteric world of reducing carbon emissions and figures and 8.5 and 3.7, that grounds me in what this is actually all about. So that's what helps me. Thank you so much for that question. It's something I bring up most times that I speak, so I really do appreciate that. It is something that is really important to me, and one of the things I commented on as we were arriving this morning is this is a bit like a family reunion. Do you know what I mean? Like, we all know each other, and if we don't, we will become fast friends. So build this community and become part of this community and introduce yourself to people that you've seen on LinkedIn, because others that work in the space, we get it, we're your friends already. And you're allowed to cry on people's shoulders out of the blue, and that's totally okay and acceptable. So that there's certainly whānau in this community, and you should definitely tap into it. I think the other thing too is be really proud of your values and your why. That's what I have to do. I have to be reminded of that sometimes regularly, sometimes not so much, but it's like, what is my why? What brought me here? Why do I care about this? Why am I doing this? And for me, I have a 17-year-old son who I do love, I promise. But he is my why, and he's been my why for many things that have been drivers in my life, and certainly this one, because I want my child to have a future that is livable. What that looks like, I don't know. But so whānau, this is part of that. That's basically it, isn't it? Whānau.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. I agree with all of what they've just said, so that was awesome. And the thing that I will add is just celebrating the wins. Like, no matter how small they are, like I have a party every time, you know, just convincing one person of something really small is a win. So take the win, share it, go and tell your confidants, people that you trust, really celebrate them.
What you're going to say? You drink a glass of wine?
No, I don't. Tea only, mate.
Yeah, for me, I think I'd echo the comment at the start from Jay. You know, spending time in nature is one thing, and you realise that everything depends on the health of our natural environment, and we're not very good as a species, I think, in recognising that. And that's one point. I think the second is, again, surrounding yourself with people who have similar values and that you can collaborate with and, I guess, lead off, because so often we're kind of working in isolation, and I personally see the system, and I'm going to be negative here, and it's so systemic problem, and we all know that, and it's like, cracking that is a pretty big task when you think that, I'm going to quote Nate Hagen's, 1 barrel of oil is something equivalent of 10 years of human labour in 1 barrel of oil, and you go, oh wow, okay, that's serious. That's why we're here. In terms of the amount of work you can do with 1 barrel of oil, we can transform the world. And now we've got to say, no, you can't use that anymore. And so we've got to think about how we live with less, and that's probably the big thing for us as a community, is going, okay, what does living with less actually look like? And the last thing is probably, I think listening to, you find those podcasts or those experts that go, here are some really cool solutions, and they're inspiring, and there's probably, each of us has probably got some good ones we listen to, and that for me definitely helps, because you go, oh, okay, there's an idea that this worked in this country or over there, and because it's really easy to go down pessimistic route, isn't it?
All the points, probably a couple of things I would add is, I reflect on earlier in my career, don't put barriers yourself in the way of things. That's really easy to do. I found recently something which I thought would be quite hard to get through, went through in a cinch. Okay? That's probably the most important thing. It's easy to go, oh, no one's going to like this, no one agrees with this sort of stuff. If you've got the right organisation culture, it can happen. You need to work out how you sell it. The other is, and use this one wisely, see what you can get away with. So you get your network of people in an organisation, you know who will support you, and just go and do stuff. You'll work out quickly what gets you kind of in trouble. So there's pros and cons of staying below the radar and being on the radar. I always get a mix of both. That's really important, because then you feel like you're making progress. And Albeen's point, you might feel small stuff, but that's what makes a difference.
Ask for forgiveness later.
Yeah. So another saying I love is big, bold, not stupid.
Yeah.
Stupid is doing stuff which you know will get you in lots of trouble. But work out, every organisation has that point where you know what you can get away with. Find out where it is and just keep nudging it. Yeah. Some industries are more regulated, like banking. Healthcare's got a lot of regulation as well, but they're still within that. Work out what you can get away with. And if you cross the line, hey, if nothing else, you've learned what you can't get away with. Take some risks.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's the close of our panel discussion. Victoria's got a final point to make. I'll do a very short summary.
I have a final point to make. Thanks, Brett. I see you over there. So I'm just going to do a little plug for what have we been doing in Te Whatu Water. So we really care about sustainability. We have a sustainability function that sits in our office of the Chief Executive, which is really exciting. We have published our baseline footprint, which we did in our first year as an organisation, which is available on our website. We also publish quarterly reports, which give an update on where we're at in various parts of our work program, which are all very pretty, as you can see, images, obviously, things on the board there. We have 3 key work streams that we're working in: decarbonisation of the health sector, of which we have we're working with ECA to have no coal-fired power on the health estate by 2025. Call for applause. We also have a $99 million co-funded energy transition program that we're also working with ECA on getting off other fossil fuel reliance such as natural gas and electrification where we can. We have our environmental practices, and that's where things such as circular economy and greening clinical practice, and there's so much in that. There's a program called Choosing Wisely, which is a health program which is around making the right decisions, prescribing right, all of those types of things. And it is actually a sustainability issue, right? And so over-prescribing pharmaceuticals, for example, is a sustainability issue. So that's really working with our clinicians and making it clinician-led so that they're making the right decisions for their specialty. And there are a number of networks that have been created across the Whatu and the various specialties in this space. And then finally, the one that's close to my heart, because I really like talking bleakly constantly, is health system resilience, risk and resilience, and really understanding how we're ensuring that we have publicly funded health services for our people. And that is my closing statement. Kia ora.
Victoria, you were all here. You don't need a summary, so I will just hand over to Brett shortly and say that my two